The Arctic doesn't need monsters to be terrifying. It's already got isolation, the endless white, the starvation, the temperature that'll kill you slower than you'd like, the silence so thick it feels like you're being watched, and the sense that if something were out there, no one would ever find your bones. And that's where the terror plants its feet. It throws something else into that frozen abyss, something with claws, a grudge, and a spiritual resume that puts most demons to shame. The Tuunbaq. Forget your standard movie monster, and definitely forget those loud, over-the-top beasts that crash through buildings for attention. No, this thing is quiet, ancient, carnivorous, and deeply personal. Born from Inuit mythology and reshaped into something far more unsettling, the Tuunbaq is more than a predator. It's a former pet of the gods, a spiritual being with a taste for human souls exiled for overstepping divine boundaries. And now it lurks in the frozen north. In this video, we'll be peeling back the ice to get a full look at the Tuunbaq, not just the claws and the teeth, but what it represents, how it moves, why it exists, and how the terror managed to create a creature that's both physically terrifying and thematically loaded. Think of it as an autopsy, except the thing you're dissecting might still be breathing. Before we get too far ahead of ourselves, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to the channel. This is a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin. Who is the Tuunbaq? The Tuunbaq is no simple beast. It's not nature gone rogue. It wasn't just dreamed up to fill the role of Arctic boogeyman. Dan Simmons built it from real Inuit beliefs, but he twisted it, mutated it. He stitches it into a blasphemy, something once divine, now disgraced. In Inuit tradition, spirits and animals are sacred. They live in balance with the land, but the Tuunbaq broke every rule. It's a spiritual anomaly, a theological fracture in the old belief systems. It doesn't belong in the sacred cosmology. It is that which should have never survived the divine culling. In Simmons's world, the Tuunbaq is said to have been created by the Inuit gods, but it went too far and it was then exiled, cast out like an abomination for crimes beyond their mercy. Why? Not because of crimes against mortals, but crimes against the sacred laws of spirit itself. Specifically, it tried to learn the language, and in Inuit cosmology, language isn't just communication, it's creation, it's power. A being like the Tuunbaq learning language was like giving fire to a hurricane. That act of transgression branded it a heretic. It became something grotesque, a thing that doesn't belong, not to the world of men and not to the world of spirits. It disrespects the natural hierarchy of gods, shamans, spirits, and men, and so it's banished. Exiled to the frozen ends of the earth, tamed only by shamans fluent in the old tongue. It's not killed, mind you, because not even the gods could destroy what they created in error. There's something almost vampiric about the Tuunbaq, but not for blood. It's addicted to language. Specifically, it devours people who speak, and not just any people, but those fluent in the Inuit languages. The Inuit tongue is ancient, powerful, and bound to creation and spirit. That's why it ignores most of the British crew on the Franklin expedition for so long. They're gibbering foreigners to it, just noise to the creature. They don't have the words it's craving. See, in Simmons's reimagining, language is a kind of magic, and the Tuunbaq is addicted to it. The Tuunbaq isn't just there to slash throats and pile bodies, it's a metaphor. It's what happens when Western arrogance clashes with the unknowable wild. The British came all in with their naval ranks and powdered wigs, thinking they could name, study, and dominate what cannot be controlled, but the Arctic is indifferent to titles or discipline. It's ancient, brutal, and alive in many ways the Brits can't even begin to understand. The Tuunbaq is that idea made flesh. It's a reaction to their arrogance, a reminder that some places don't want to be tamed. As the men of the expedition lose supplies, shelter, and structure, they don't just succumb to starvation or scurvy, they lose identity, morality, and meaning. The deeper the British go into the ice, the more they fall apart, and the more vulnerable they become to the creature. They stop listening, they stop respecting, and the Tuunbaq eats them one by one. The Tuunbaq doesn't just chase them, it waits, it watches, because it knows that they're already dying, spiritually, culturally, and linguistically. Meanwhile, the Inuit survive not by fighting the land, but by listening to it, living with it. They don't map it, they speak to it. The difference? That's the real horror Simmons writes about. Not claws and teeth, but the price of forgetting how to listen. The Tuunbaq haunts the ice, yes, but it isn't just scary because it kills, it's scary because it's what happens when we forget what matters, when we lose touch with language, land, and spirit. It lives in the silence between cultures, in the gaps between old stories and people who no longer tell them. It's not just a creature, it's what happens when stories die, when sacred meanings are lost, when the old gods starve for lack of worship. If you think the terror is just about a killer polar bear, you missed the point. The Tuunbaq is the soul of the story, a broken god, a creature of hunger, and a warning we didn't listen to. The premise and plot of the Terror. The HMS Erebus and the HMS Terror set out with the best British arrogance, state-of-the-art Victorian technology, and enough canned food to feed a small army. It's 1845, and Sir John Franklin's Royal Navy expedition is sailing into the uncharted Arctic, determined to find the fabled Northwest Passage and scribble their names all over history. They don't come back, and that's not a spoiler, so don't come at us. That's the actual historical record. For decades, it became one of the greatest mysteries in maritime history. Eventually, evidence pointed to the ships being icebound off King William Island. The crews abandoned their vessels, facing unimaginable conditions: minus 50-degree temperatures, scurvy, lead poisoning, and starvation. Inuit oral history spoke of pale men traveling south, some resorting to cannibalism. But The Terror, AMC's adaptation of Dan Simmons' novel with the same name, doesn't just stop with frostbite and bad rations. It dares to ask, what if something else was out there? Something older than their empire, colder than death, and starving for more than just flesh. Sir John Franklin wasn't new to Arctic exploration. The man had failed before. But this time he was hell-bent on success. The ships were reinforced with iron hulls, and they came loaded with smoke, noise, and steel, the latest tech and provisions for years. They even brought a library and dragged their own gods, science, and bureaucracy into a sacred land where none of them belonged. Optimism practically dripped from the decks. Too bad the Arctic doesn't care about optimism. The ice traps them. The more these men dig in, the more nature pushes back. The ice thickens, the sun vanishes, the mercury drops. Soon food runs low, morale cracks. Diseases creep in and men begin to die, first quietly, then desperately. It's cold, dark, and getting worse by the day, but it's not just the weather killing them. Something's out there, something huge. Something ancient and watching, and when it strikes, it doesn't leave survivors, just meat and questions. And you hear it before you see it. A dragging sound in the snow, a low groan on the wind, then there's blood, and not the polite kind. We're talking guts strewn across the ice blood. The Tuunbaq is not a bear, it's not even really an animal. It's a supernatural predator, half spirit and half polar bear. It doesn't attack at random, it targets, it watches, and then punishes. Franklin and his men believed they were bringing civilization to a blank map. They thought the land was empty, lifeless, and waiting to be named, but the Tuunbaq was already there. It had always been there. And when Franklin's crew disrupts the balance, trespassing where they shouldn't and silencing shamans, the Tuunbaq responds. Not out of rage, but out of ritual. It is nature correcting a mistake. The mistake is them. The crew thinks it's a monster, but in the eyes of the Tuunbaq, they are the monsters. They came in uninvited, digging into land they didn't understand, mocking spirits they didn't even know existed. Their presence is sacrilege, and the Tuunbaq is here to clean house. Its attacks are horrifying, yes, but they're also a kind of retribution. Nature's wrath sharpened into fangs. Lady Silence, an Inuit shaman's daughter whose Inuktitut name is Silna, is both the Tuunbaq's medium and its prisoner. Her father served the Tuunbaq and was its keeper. When Silna's father is killed, with him dies the last functioning contract between the Tuunbaq and mankind. Silna was next in line. Now the responsibility is hers. The Tuunbaq allows her to live, not out of kindness, but necessity. She becomes its only connection to language, its last thread to the world it was banished from, but she's grieving. And worse, she's mute. She cut her tongue out and offered it as a sacrifice and committed to her lifelong connection to the Tuunbaq. But without the voice, she can no longer chant, guide, appease, or even intercede. The Tuunbaq becomes a god without a priest. It starts killing indiscriminately. The Soul Eater becomes rabid. However, she doesn't fear it. Not exactly. Despite being brutalized and silenced, Silna doesn't abandon the Tuunbaq. She follows it, feeds it, lives with it, and honors it. Eventually, she tries to save it. There's a perverse bond between her and the creature. Where the British see an animal, Silna sees a being on the verge of spiritual collapse. A thing that was once kept in check by ritual, now unleashed into a world where its rules don't apply anymore. She tries, in her own quiet way, to help. But the Tuunbaq no longer listens. It has started eating not just the bad, but the weak, the innocent, and the scared. In the end, Silna doesn't survive because she's immune. She survives because she belongs. She's a part of the land. She respects the Tuunbaq. She fears it, mourns for it, and ultimately she is the only one left who can carry its memory. That's heavy stuff. The terror isn't just about a doomed expedition, it's about what happens when men forget how small they really are. The Tuunbaq isn't there to entertain us, it's there to remind us you don't conquer the Arctic, you endure it. You listen to it. Or it eats you, body and soul. And honestly, you probably deserved it. What does the Tuunbaq look like? Hey, we get it, it looks like a polar bear at first glance, but describing the Tuunbaq as a bear is like calling Cthulhu an octopus. You'd be technically correct, but still very wrong. The Tuunbaq isn't a bear, not really. It wears the suggestion of one, but the closer you look, the more wrong it gets. In the novel, Simmons makes sure you never get comfortable with the image. It's constantly wrong, constantly shifting between something you almost understand and something your brain begs you not to. It's a creature that resists the mind's attempt to categorize it. The Tuunbaq is huge, massive. It's described as impossibly huge, too big to have survived on Earth's resources, too fast and agile for something that size to move the way it does. It's a violation of natural law. It shouldn't exist, and yet it does. The first sign that something is horribly wrong with Tuunbaq is its head and neck. Its neck is too long, it stretches unnaturally, and the head is narrow, angular, not the rounded bulk of a bear's skull. And then there's the mouth, the centerpiece of its horror. The Tuunbaq doesn't kill like a regular predator, it unhinges, jaw hanging down too far, stretching far too wide open. Inside it, a chaotic mess of teeth. Too many, too long, too jagged. Its eyes, some say they're black pits. Some say they're too human. Others describe them as full of ancient hate or bottomless hunger. In any case, the eyes aren't animal. They reflect intelligence, rage, and even sorrow. Something's thinking in there, and not thinking nice things about you. The Tuunbaq has patchy, mangy fur, tufts missing, bald spots where disease or corruption is eaten through. The body looks diseased, decaying, even while alive. It smells like rot and corruption. The Tuunbaq eats not just your body, it extracts your soul. The Tuunbaq moves silently with an impossible grace, sometimes with a jerking spider-like rhythm, sometimes like it's gliding across the snow. It doesn't leave normal tracks, and its footprints are enormous but irregular. AMC's The Terror had the unenviable job of trying to show something that's mostly terrifying because it defies being seen. So what did they do? They leaned in just enough to give it form without killing the mystery. A giant pale white polar bear, but off. It's built like a beast but animated with malice. Where a bear lumbers, the Tuunbaq stalks. It's thinner than expected, its limbs are too long, its stance is unnatural. His face flickers between the familiar and the wrong. There are brief glimpses of its true form, moments where it's almost human or almost alien. The jaw still distends, the mouth still doesn't make anatomical sense. Its presence on screen is often blurred, quick, or partially obscured. This isn't budget saving, it's deliberate. A creature that resists being fully seen. This version of the Tuunbaq looks back at you. Its gaze is cold, ancient, and bitter. You're not being watched by an animal, you're being assessed, judged, and then you're found wanting. Much like the book, the Tuunbaq doesn't attack randomly. The series shows it striking with eerie timing. It waits, watches, then punishes. It never feels like it's just hunting for food, it feels like it's purging the land of desecration. It's an anatomical impossibility. If God vomited out his one mistake and buried it in the snow, then that's the Tuunbaq. Every part of it feels wrong, by design. It's not here to be understood, it's here to unmake. The Tuunbaq is the Arctic, not the one on your map, the real one. The one that doesn't care if you brought science, ships, or noble intentions. The one that existed long before man decided they could name everything. And in that Arctic, the Tuunbaq is judge, jury, and soul thief. You'll see it once, maybe, then your blood's in the snow, your soul's been eaten, and your last thought is that you probably should have stayed home. The novel's Tuunbaq is a literary creature meant to haunt the reader's imagination. The show's Tuunbaq is visual horror made flesh, leaning more into ghostly ambiance and sudden violence. Both work, but the novel version is the deeper, darker demon. How does the Tuunbaq kill its prey? Forget everything you know about predators. The Tuunbaq doesn't stalk prey to feed or survive, it kills because it must. It was created to dominate and to punish, and it reminds mortals that some things buried in the snow were never meant to be disturbed. This isn't an animal looking for a meal. No. Banished from the divine for wanting too much, the Tuunbaq now walks the ice in the flesh, waging a silent, brutal war on those who trespass where they shouldn't. When the Tuunbaq strikes, it doesn't go for a clean kill. There's no elegance to it, and definitely no mercy. The aftermath looks like something a war god would leave behind. Some are missing limbs, not cleanly severed, but wrenched off, as if the Tuunbaq was testing how far human anatomy could stretch before breaking. Eyes gouged out, faces peeled or clawed open, its massive weight is a weapon, but it doesn't just trample, it presses, crushes, like it's trying to squeeze the soul out through the ribs. Rib cages collapse inward, spines snap like brittle twigs. You can't just call it a day with a broken leg, you get reduced to ruin. Victims aren't hidden, their bodies are left sprawled out in the open, as if the Tuunbaq wants them found. Arms are pulled off and heads are twisted free. Guts are unraveled across the snow in long trails. The snow around them is painted red. It makes statements with the body. This one was a warning. This one was an execution. This one was just because it could. And the mouth is its true weapon. When it bites, it doesn't just tear flesh, it removes the soul. Victims are found with their faces mangled or missing entirely. There's a suggestion that the Tuunbaq eats meaning, not meat. In some cases, the bodies are half-eaten, random, unpatterned. Not for nourishment, but for spiritual consumption. It's trying to devour what made the person human. The Tuunbaq doesn't target at random, it chooses. It picks off the sick, the alone, the desperate. It knows when someone is spiritually thin, emotionally raw, or physically broken. It goes after those who are already fraying at the edges. The Tuunbaq punishes disrespect. Step out of line with Inuit customs, desecrate a sacred place, and the Tuunbaq comes. Not immediately, not loudly, but it remembers. You don't escape because you apologize, you die because you didn't know better in the first place. The Tuunbaq doesn't just kill to kill, it terrifies first, it isolates, it lets them hear it sometimes, low growls in the night, the crunch of snow just out of torchlight, bodies vanishing mid-watch. It lets paranoia spread through the ranks. Some men break before the Tuunbaq ever touches them. That's part of the kill. And once the morale is shattered, discipline gone, the expedition tearing itself apart from within, then the Tuunbaq closes in. Does the Tuunbaq have supernatural abilities? Calling the Tuunbaq a creature is selling it short. This thing is not only a physical threat, but also supernatural in the purest, most terrifying sense. A punishment god exiled to the edge of the world, given flesh so that it could walk among men and end them. It's not of this world, it's anchored in it, just barely, and even then it refuses to obey the rules. So if you think you can fight it like you would an animal or exercise it like a ghost, congratulations, you're already dead. Physically, the Tuunbaq can be injured, but not meaningfully. Normal weapons are useless. Bullets slow it, maybe stun it, but they don't pierce deep. Blades can barely scratch through its hide. It heals, or maybe it just ignores damage. There's never a sense that a gunfight could kill it. Even fire, a universal equalizer in most horror stories, doesn't seem to faze it much. This body is not only flesh and blood, it's a vessel. You can crack the shell, but you're never hitting the core. Simmons describes it as too massive and too alien to kill with tools forged by men. It's not built to die. However, it did die, both in the book and the TV series. While in the book, it perishes not by blade or by bullet, but by spiritual starvation. It's poisoned by the broken, corrupted souls it's consumed. In the TV series, it chokes on the chain while devouring its snack. That should tell you exactly what kind of being we're dealing with here. It rips out what makes a human soul unique. Language, memory, spirit, and it devours that. This is where the Soul Eater mythology comes in. It's not just chomping down to feed its belly, it's feeding a void. It wants meaning. That's why it prefers Inuit speakers. Their language isn't just communication, it's a spiritual matter, sacred in and of itself. If it tears your body apart and leaves it half-eaten, that's not just an act of cruelty, that's leftovers. What it wanted is already gone. In both the novel and the show, the Tuunbaq is not merely a supernatural monster, it's implied to be a being of divine lineage cast out for breaking spiritual laws. And this is what makes the Tuunbaq something terrifyingly rare, a fallen god. A deity that broke sacred order and was given form as punishment, forced to walk among mortals, starving not for food, but for meaning. You're not facing a demon, you're facing something that used to be worshipped, something that used to be among stars and spirits, but now lives in a rotting body made of teeth, claws, and hunger. The Tuunbaq's supernatural abilities go far beyond brute force. It's nearly immortal, spiritually ravenous, cosmically exiled. It doesn't obey the rules of biology or theology or physics. It exists outside the margins. An erasure spirit made flesh, come to judge those who dare treat sacred ground like their own. You cannot outrun it, and you sure as hell can't kill it with powder and lead. Because the Tuunbaq isn't death, it's what comes after, when death still isn't enough. What is the Tuunbaq's connection to the Inuit people? The Tuunbaq was a spiritual creation that meant something once. before the blood, before the exile, before it turned into a soul-eating predator in the snow. To understand the Tuunbaq is to understand its roots in Inuit culture and the harsh sacredness of the Arctic. It isn't just a beast roaming the tundra, it's a god-made weapon turned spiritual time bomb. And now, it exists because no one can destroy it. In the mythology, as imagined in the TV series The Terror, the Tuunbaq was created by ancient Inuit shamans, not stumbled upon, not summoned by accident, made deliberately. Why? Because sometimes even the old gods need a monster. In this version, the Tuunbaq was meant to be a spiritual enforcer. A guardian of the sacred, a punisher of spiritual violations, it was bound to Inuit shamans who could communicate with it, who kept it balanced and tied to the world through ritual, language, and silence. But the Tuunbaq wanted more. It wasn't content with being a divine guard dog. It tried to learn the forbidden. It tried to speak. So it was exiled. The only way to deal with the Tuunbaq after its exile was through the tongues. Chosen Inuit shamans trained to communicate with it, mediate its needs, and offer it the only thing it still hungered for: spiritual connection. These tongues didn't speak in the usual sense. Many, like Lady Silence, removed their own tongues to honor a deeper silence, the kind of silence that lets one hear between worlds. They acted as bridges between the moral and the divine Monstrous. Lady Silence is the last known tongue. She doesn't command it. She survives it. She understands it. And, in the frozen emptiness left behind by dying cultures and dying gods, understanding is the last sacred thing left. When the British arrive, pompous and ignorant, they bring more than ships. They bring arrogance. They bring maps. They bring the assumption that everything, even the Arctic, can be named, measured, and conquered. The Inuit tried to warn them. Lady Silence's very presence is a warning. Her silence is a warning. The strange behavior of the ice, the unease of the land, the stories whispered through hunters and elders, all warnings. But the British don't listen. They see her as a threat or a mystery or a curiosity, perhaps deranged. They think all the stories are superstition, myths, backward babble from an uncivilized people. And that's the beginning of their end, because the Tuunbaq isn't superstition, it's real. And worse, it's wounded, alone, without guidance. Without a tongue, it's starving, and now, a new crop of disrespectful souls has come marching into its domain, speaking loudly in foreign tongues, cutting into sacred land with metal, arrogance, and fear. They refuse to see meaning in the unexplained, until it's too late, until the unexplained rips their crew in half. Why does the Tuunbaq attack the expedition? We've established the Tuunbaq doesn't kill for sport, it doesn't kill to eat, it doesn't even kill to survive. Its violence is never random, it's a response. To understand why the Tuunbaq turns on the Franklin expedition is to grasp the full weight of the Terror's narrative, because this isn't just a survival story, it's a punishment story. And the Tuunbaq is not just the executioner, it's the voice of the Arctic itself, spoken in blood and spiritual rage. The British expedition sails into the Arctic with haughty confidence. They bring their own culture, their own customs, their own hierarchy, and they believe that these things will conquer the land. But they're not just walking into snow and cold, they're walking into sacred ground. Land where every gust of wind, every carved stone, every echo on the ice holds spiritual weight. And they come in talking over it. They ignore the Inuit, they mock their beliefs, they cut into the land. They assume it will bend to them. The Arctic doesn't bend, it waits, and then it snaps. The Tuunbaq isn't angered by one act, it's enraged by the pattern, a presence that pollutes. An expedition so spiritually hollow, it poisons what it touches. These men aren't just strangers, they're intrusions, and they don't belong. Originally created by Inuit shamans to act as a spiritual guardian, the Tuunbaq once served with purpose. It was never gentle, but it had boundaries. It could be spoken to, mediated, and respected. Lady Silence's father was a tongue, a spiritual mediator who could communicate with it. His presence kept the creature connected, grounded in ritual, but early in the story, he's killed by the expedition. The one thread left between man and spirit is severed. The last voice that could have spoken to the Tuunbaq is silenced. And so, the beast begins its long, slow purge. Not out of blind rage, but because now there was nothing left to hold it back. Without the tongue, it becomes what it was exiled to be, a destroyer. The Tuunbaq now roams untethered, its purpose corrupted but still felt. It continues to act almost instinctively as the Arctic's guardian, and when the expedition arrives, it senses what they are. They disrespect the land, they never understand that some places were never meant for man. And when man pushes in, brings flags and faith and fire, the land doesn't scream, it responds. With cold, with silence, and with something massive waiting just past the horizon. That thing is the Tuunbaq. It recognizes a threat not just to its territory, but to the sacred balance it was born to protect, and it just starts removing the infection. Is the Tuunbaq inspired by real Inuit legends? The Tuunbaq didn't crawl out of an ancient Inuit legend. It wasn't whispered in igloos or carved into bone. You won't find it murmured in the old tales of elders, because the Tuunbaq, as it exists in The Terror, is a fictional creation, a myth that Dan Simmons built rather than borrowed. But like all effective monsters, it's rooted in truth, and that's what makes it horrifying. It feels real. Feels like something you should have heard about already, because Simmons surgically grafted Inuit cosmology, colonial history, and Lovecraftian existential dread into something new, something wrong in the best way. Let's get that out of the way. There's no creature named Tuunbaq in Inuit mythology. No old texts, oral traditions, or shamanic stories describe a spirit bear that devours language and soul. The Tuunbaq is pure invention, but it's crafted so carefully, so passionately interwoven with existing mythological textures that it feels ancient. Simmons didn't create a monster, he made a false memory, something that haunts as if it were always there. So, what is it based on? Well, not direct analogs, there are elements in Inuit lore that clearly inspired the design and the spiritual logic of the Tuunbaq. The Kalapalak is one of them. This is a mythological being from Inuit folklore, a child-snatching creature that lives beneath the ice. It hums, it waits, and it takes out those who stray too close to the shore. The Kalupalak isn't a predator in the traditional sense, but an entity born to enforce boundaries. That's very Tuunbaq-coded. The Tuunik or Tunir are often depicted as giant supernatural beings in Inuit mythology. Sometimes ancient, sometimes forgotten, often cast as otherworldly giants who lived before the Inuit arrived. Some versions say they were wiped out by the Inuit, others say they faded. Simmons' Tuunbaq fits this mold perfectly, a massive, powerful being left behind, now stalking the world. Neither of these is the Tuunbaq, but they offer the bones for the story. Simmons supplied the flesh. The Tuunbaq is fiction, but it's fiction with roots. That's the genius of the Tuunbaq. Simmons didn't pull from real Inuit legends, but he wrote it like it should have been one. Every detail, every moment it's felt or feared is layered with spiritual plausibility. He respected the weight of Inuit cosmology while also twisting it into something uniquely horrifying. It isn't real, but it should be. Because now, whenever you hear the wind howl across the tundra or see empty snow stretching into forever, a part of you knows. The Tuunbaq could be real. It could be waiting. And if it is, no one would find your body, only pieces, and maybe not even that. How does the Tuunbaq compare to other horror monsters? The Tuunbaq isn't your average horror monster. It not only claws at flesh, but also at meaning. It's not here to entertain with gore or chase scenes, it's here to punish, to cleanse, and to restore a balance that mankind never had permission to disrupt in the first place. When compared against horror's most iconic beasts, from the primal to the apocalyptic, the Tuunbaq is something else. So let's compare it, piece by piece, horror by horror, and see where this spirit creature from The Terror stands among the greats. Let's start with what's closest. Though not Inuit, the Wendigo from Algonquin folklore is a monstrous cannibalistic spirit of the frozen wilds, one born from hunger, isolation, and broken taboos. It's a metaphor for consumption that never ends. The Tuunbaq shares similarities. Both are tied to the cold, the isolated, and the forsaken. Both have unnatural hungers, the Wendigo for flesh and the Tuunbaq for souls and language. Both serve as cautionary tales about imbalance, crossing lines, breaking taboos, and defying the natural order. The Wendigo is myth. The Tuunbaq is what happens when that myth is funneled through cosmic horror and dropped into the Arctic. Simmons admitted Lovecraftian influence, and it shows. The Tuunbaq shares likeness with creatures like Cthulhu, Nyarlathotep, and Shub-Niggurath. These are beings so ancient and vast that they exist outside human comprehension. The Tuunbaq, like Lovecraft's old ones, is not concerned with human morality. It judges by laws older than language. Just as Lovecraft's gods induce madness through their sheer unknowability, the Tuunbaq unnerves not just through violence, but by being wrong. Anatomically, morally, and cosmically wrong. In both universes, man isn't special. The more humans assert control, the more they're dismantled. However, Lovecraft's monsters are indifferent. The Tuunbaq cares, in the most brutal, ancient, ritualistic way. It was made by men, cast out by gods. It has history, pain, hunger, and purpose. It feels, even if those feelings are warped beyond its understanding. And that makes it worse. You can't reason with it, but you can disappoint the Tuunbaq, and then it kills you for it. Godzilla and King Kong are iconic walking metaphors for war, destruction, and humanity's hubris, but they fall short next to the Tuunbaq. While Godzilla is radiation incarnate and Kong is an evolutionary anomaly, the Tuunbaq is a spiritual weapon, stitched with myth, born of sin. Godzilla and King Kong tower and roar, front and center, but the Tuunbaq lurks. It watches. You might only know it by the way a man disappears in the dark or the mess it leaves behind. You kill Godzilla, he comes back. Kong falls and another rises. The Tuunbaq dies once and the Arctic grieves. Its death means something. It's felt. Another creature that comes to mind when we talk about the Tuunbaq is Ridley Scott's Xenomorph, a machine of survival, evolution, and violent birth. Both hunt in silence, both strike with efficiency, both are terrifying because they don't speak, they act. While the Xenomorph transforms its victims through parasitism, the Tuunbaq unmakes them. It leaves them dismembered, mutilated, and meaningless. However, what makes the Tuunbaq more disturbing is that the Xenomorph is the ultimate survivor, but the Tuunbaq is the ultimate judge. You can hide from a Xenomorph, you might even outrun it. The Tuunbaq, it doesn't chase you. It lets you rot in the snow until you're spiritually hollow, and then it ends you. The Tuunbaq doesn't fit neatly into any monster taxonomy. It doesn't belong to any one genre. It's too mythic to be a simple ghost story and too grounded in cultural tragedy to be pure cosmic horror. The Tuunbaq is an uninvited god. It's a consequence. It's what stares back when humanity crosses into places it was never meant to touch. And it kills you not out of hunger or hatred, but out of duty. Where other monsters haunt you, the Tuunbaq condemns you, and you'll never hear it coming. How is the Tuunbaq ultimately defeated? As the beast grows weaker and more wounded, so does the environment. There's a quiet but unmistakable link drawn between the creature's decline and the land falling out of balance. The Tuunbaq doesn't go down in a blaze of gunfire. Its end is quiet, tragic, disturbing. It dies not because someone was brave or clever enough to slay it, but because the world around it rotted so thoroughly that even a spirit of judgment couldn't survive. In a story filled with cold cruelty and collapse, the Tuunbaq's death might be the most haunting tragedy of all, because it doesn't just mark the end of the monster, it marks the spiritual death of the land it once protected. By the time the terror reaches its final chapters, the Tuunbaq is a fading god, a creature of immense power that has spent years consuming nothing but rot. It was never supposed to feed on men like this, not these men. These are not Inuit elders, shamans, or the spiritually rich. They're broken officers and desperate sailors, men hollowed out by isolation, arrogance, starvation, and madness. The Tuunbaq needs spiritual sustenance to survive, but what it's getting from the Franklin expedition is spiritual poison. Every soul it devours carries less meaning, less language, less connection to the sacred. It eats them, yes, but it gets no nourishment, only contamination. Although Lady Silence is the final tongue, the last human being capable of mediating between the Tuunbaq and the spiritual laws it once obeyed, she does not command it. She doesn't wield it like a weapon. What she provides is balance, which keeps the Tuunbaq from becoming entirely feral, but she can't save it. By the time Captain Crozier takes command of the fractured remains of the expedition, the Tuunbaq is no longer a mystery. When Tuunbaq goes for the upper half of Hickey's body, the chain is already jammed deep in its throat. It starts choking almost instantly, but the truth is, it's already dying, bit by bit. Poisoned crew members, tainted meat, sickness from the tins. The Tuunbaq dies not from a blade or a bullet, but from the same curse that devours the men it hunts. Consuming the bodies of men with corrupt souls only pushed it closer to the edge. It doesn't take much more than that. Crozier grabs the other end of the chain and yanks with everything he has. The metal tears through the Tuunbaq's insides. The beast stumbles, vomits, and dies, broken from the inside out. Its death is brutal and loaded with meaning. When it finally collapses, there's a moment of stillness, and then the mourning of the Inuit. That's when it becomes clear this wasn't a mindless predator. Tuunbaq was a victim. The real enemy wasn't the creature, but the arrogance of men who thought they could march into this frozen world and conquer it. The invaders want to dominate what they don't understand, and when Tuunbaq resists, they kill it, just as they do to native people who won't submit. It dies choking on a chain, a literal and symbolic death at the hands of conquest. The story might follow the British crew, but beneath the surface, it's urging us to look closer, to question who we're supposed to sympathize with. Lady Silence disappears, her role complete. Her god is dead, her people gone. Crozier survives, but he carries the weight of everything that's happened. He sees the destruction left in their wake and chooses not to return to that world. Instead, he stays, adopting the ways of the Inuit, trying to live in harmony with the land. But there's no clean ending. More ships will come, more men will follow. Could the Tuunbaq return in a future adaptation? The Tuunbaq's body may be buried beneath unmarked snowdrifts, its name may have fallen silent even among the Inuit, but gods, even exiled ones, have a way of returning when the world forgets why they were banished in the first place. This is where the conversation begins. The Tuunbaq was never just flesh and sinew. Its physical form, mangled, monstrous, wrong, was never its original state. That body was a vessel that held something far older inside. Its body may have decayed, but if one accepts that it was a manifestation of divine energy, then its spirit will still linger, migrate, sleep, and transform. Or maybe it's not a single being, but a symptom of violation. Or maybe the Tuunbaq never fully died. It just shifted into a new form, into the land itself, into the language of the Arctic, now waiting for someone foolish enough to listen the wrong way. It could be reawakened, or worse, reinvoked. Now imagine a modern-day Arctic research team digging through the melting ice. Global warming has opened up vast stretches of the Northwest Passage. Scientists, corporations, maybe even militaries are flooding into the Arctic with drones, drills, and satellites. And they go deeper than they should. They find the wreck of the Erebus again. Bones, teeth marks no animal should have made, burial markers, ritual sites that were never meant to be unearthed. They laugh at the warnings etched into the stone with animal blood and ochre. And the silence breaks. Something wakes. The ice begins to crack because something buried within has felt the warmth of arrogance again. The Tuunbaq may be cyclical. It awakens whenever colonial power disrespects the sacred. Every few centuries, it rises to cleanse the land. Maybe it once stalked Siberia. Maybe it's whispered through the death cults of the north. The Tuunbaq doesn't have to rise in the same form. Maybe it's different now. A new Tuunbaq, a new trespass, same old punishment. Lady Silence vanished into myth at the end of the series. We don't know where she went. We don't know what she carried with her, but what if her line didn't end? What if she taught others? Or what if the Tuunbaq is the Arctic? The ice, the land, the memory, every predator, every spirit. It's the land's immune system. Not a monster, but an autoimmune response to colonial infection. The Tuunbaq was never just a monster. It was a warning, and warnings, once buried, have a way of being unearthed. So yes, the Tuunbaq could return. Not as a sequel, not as fan service, but as a reckoning for a new era. A myth reborn in a world too proud to remember why it was whispered about in the first place. Marvelous verdict! On the surface, Tuunbaq is a killer, but go deeper and you'll see Tuunbaq is more than just claws and carnage. It's a consequence. You walk into a sacred place with boots and flags, you're gonna certainly wake something up. It's the price you pay when you treat the unknown like it's yours to label and own. In the end, the Tuunbaq doesn't care about your compass, your god, or your expedition orders. It guards its land like an ancient curse with teeth. You can't reason with it, you can't kill it, and you definitely can't outlast it. The Tuunbaq is the North. It belongs there. The creature isn't out of place, you are. Franklin's men brought hubris, arrogance, canned food, and a total lack of respect for a land older than memory, and the Tuunbaq made damn sure they paid the price. So if you ever find yourself drifting too far north, chasing glory or answers, don't. Turn around. Because some things up there aren't sleeping. Some things are watching, and some things don't want to be understood, they want to be left alone. That's all we got for you this time, but if you enjoyed the video, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Thanks for watching, stay safe out there, and have a marvelous day.